Gimel. No, Tzaddik Gimel Bet.
Okay, somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah. והנה המידות עליונות. חסד וגבורה. So in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, meaning in Atzilus, whenever it says Elyon, anything Atzilah, Elyon, it's talking about Atzilus.
But it's not talking about them compared to other midot.
Yeah, because there's midot in Bria, and there's midot in Yetzirah, and midot in
midot in everything.
Yeah. So just to tell us that it's in Atzilus, he tells us Elyonot.
No, what I meant was that there's not one midah in one place which is higher than another midah in the same place. Like Chochmah is not higher than Chesed.
Yeah, you would say that, but usually there's no need to compare because everybody knows. V'nei midot Elyonot, meaning the midos in Atzilus, in emanation. Chesed ugvura. היו מהירים מהמשכה הבאה עליהם מחוכמה הילאה אל בחינת נוקבה בבחינת פנים. עיקר החיות כנ"ל. So the order was that in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, that when a Jew would do a mitzvah, so the bittul, the sense of duty to do the mitzvah came from Chochmah. That's the entranceway of all the infinite energy of Hashem into the person, or into the world. And then from Chochmah, as he explained, it would go down to the heart. It would create feeling, emotion. And when the person did the mitzvah, there would be emotion in his actions. And from the heart, it would go to the lungs, like we saw, and it would become speech. Or the heart gives energy to the rest of the body. So if it's mitzvah like shaking the lulav, so there would be heartfelt action.
Why only in the time of the Beis Hamikdash?
Because that's how it worked then.
Why doesn't it work like that now?
Because there's no face. Hashem doesn't show his face. That's the whole point. The Beis Hamikdash is like Hashem revealing the face, panim.
I thought that's when you bring the korban chagiga.
You not just chagiga. You go to see and be seen.
Right.
The mitzvah is to be seen or to see. You see Hashem. What does it mean to see Hashem? It doesn't have a picture. Otherwise, put it up on your wall at home. Why do you need to go to the Beis Hamikdash? The meaning of panim befanim or re'ayon or all these things that have to do with seeing in Beis Hamikdash, in the temple, it relates to how the person experiences his Torah observance. Is it done with my heart or not with my heart?
I always thought it was a one-off thing, like you walk in the Beis Hamikdash, you become aware of Hashem, and then it goes back to normal. It was
for every person, it took longer or shorter, but the minimum was that you needed to come 3 times a year. Right? The minimum was that you needed to replenish your ability to feel 3 times a year. So that's what happened in the Beis Hamikdash.
The first one and the second one?
כן, same thing. ובחינת מידות שיש בזה העולם, יום ולילה, מזרח ומערב, היה בא בהשתלשלות מן המידות עליונות אל בחינת הנוקבה, ממלא כל המין ועם השפעת, and so on. So in other words, this affected the entire world. It wasn't just in the Beis Hamikdash.
Right.
The entire world was far more heartfelt. There was a lot more heart in what was being done. So this is a little surprising, because in certain areas it's clear that what he's saying is true. In other areas, it's a little bit more difficult because there was slavery in the time of the Beis Hamikdash.
It says that if the Goyim would have known what the
Beis Hamikdash was
doing for them,
right,
they would have protected it with their bodies.
Right.
What does slavery have to do with it?
Because slavery is not heartfelt. When a person is a slave or an indentured servant, it's hard to imagine that he was doing things in a heartfelt way. Except
the slaves weren't Jewish. The slaves were
so this affected the whole world. The whole world was more
slaves
emotional.
Who were beaten and put in chains, and and Uncle Tom's.
No, that's modern slavery. I don't think that ancient slavery was
completely
the same
different. This just meant that they were owned by one owner, and they worked for him.
Okay, and it was sort of like being in a company, in a certain sense, but it's not exactly, because in any case. The surprising thing is that we imagine that the world of the ancients was drudgery. It was just black and white. It was gray. It was this. It was that. But that's not that's not what you see. For instance, when you read Mishnah, you read Talmud, you read Medrash, and they were still affected by these times. You see that the sayings that people say are very laden with meaning. So it's true that we don't have a radio show from 600 BCE. We could hear how people talked on the street. That we don't have. But there's a lot of reason to say that even simple people, when they talked, there was a lot more meaning in the words than there is now. There were less words, that's for sure. The languages were not as developed, right? Today in English, you have this crazy, effluence of words. 500,000 words. Nobody knows everything, but there's words for everything.
It's 500,000 words in English?
Yeah, and there's everything has a word. There were not that many objects. There were not that many. Language was far more limited. So I think that what that says is that when people spoke, there was a lot more concentrated into every sentence they said. Even though they weren't intellectual, it was coming from the heart. It was something else. They were doing things with a lot more heart. And one of the ways that you see this, for instance, is you couldn't... There were no modern machines. And yet you see the way the ancients built their important buildings. You can't get artisans to do that today. I mean, all the more so that you can't get indentured servants to do it this way today. People are scatter-minded. Like, they were concentrated. If a person was a stone cutter, that's all they did. So their heart and their soul was in stone cutting. And so you see, even a simple servant who all he did was cut, one facet of a stone, who knows? That was his entire life. So everything was concentrated into that one act. So I think that...
No multitasking.
Right. There was no distractions. There was no... The heart was where... It maybe was a shorter life, but the heart was exactly where it was. You were where you were doing things. And so he says in that sense, also, I think that it's safe to say that even a servant or a slave who was cutting wheat in the field was doing it with a lot more heart and intent than we who learn when we're learning. Even when we learn, I don't think we reach that level of intent of the heart. When we're supposedly not distracted, we put our cell phones away. I mean, certainly in the last, when you think about it, we in our age, in our old age, we've seen the big transition from the world without computers to the world with cell phones. And I think you'll agree that
3 different worlds.
Mamish, we saw 3 different worlds. And if you remember the world of the 70s before the PCs, I don't remember it, but I sort of have an inkling of it. When people did things, they really did them. There was a lot more concentration. That's the way I remember it. And it's not that you can't concentrate on a computer. You can. And you can be completely closed off from everything. But the moment that the internet came in, you're working hard to concentrate, so you're wasting a lot of your energy on blocking out all the distractions. So I'm not sure that this is the main thing, but I think it's one of the big things, that they had a lot more heart in what they were doing than we do. And that's what he means. That at the time of the Beis HaMikdash, when a person davened, because of the Beis HaMikdash, because of the temple, because of the focus that it provided, the heart was there. It was really there.
In 1974, when I was finishing studying pharmacy, one of the guys walked into and he had this little black envelope like this, and he opened it and it was a total sensation. Inside, there were all sorts of numbers, 1 to 10, and you pressed them and you could add up and subtract and take away, and it had here solar panels, and it was powered by solar. Nobody had ever seen such a thing. 1974.
That's when they started coming out. Okay. So all this was in the time of Beis HaMikdash. וכמו שכתוב במשה, כשעושה נס בחינת התגלות מה שלמעלה מן הטבע, כמו שהתבר, מוליך לימין משה, חסד לימינו, בחינת אברהם. And this was the reason that there were miracles, he says. Miracles occurred because the heart was there. And so, what is the miracle doing? It's taking the infinite revelation of Hashem above and focusing it here below. וכשחטאו ישראל כתיב, כי פנו אליי עורף ולא פנים. Right? When Yirmiyahu says that when the Jewish people sinned to Hashem, what does it mean to sin? It means to turn your face, to show your backside. And this is a big principle in Chassidus, that when you sin, it's not that Hashem has given up on you, it's rather that you've turned your face to Hashem. You've turned around. כי גרמו במעשה מעניין סילוק הערת פני המידות העליונות על בחינת נוקבה ממלא כל עלמין. ואינם מאירים עליו בבחינת אחוריים כנעל. שהחיות שם מעט מזר. So from now on, Hashem is still facing you. He's still giving you His infinite light, but you've turned your back to Him.
You've turned the cup upside down so the water doesn't go in.
So it's not that it's hitting your backside, and your backside receives very little. The same way, again, that the senses are in the front, the eyes, the ears, the mouth, the smell, everything, and even in the touch, he says all five senses are really in the front of the face. And so the image that the prophets give is that you've turned your backside to Him. And now that you turn your backside, you can't get the infinite light of Hashem through you. And it's not coming through you anymore. ומה שיש בעולמות התחתונים התחלקות המידות יום ולילה, איננה בחינת אחוריים ממידות עליונים אחור ואחור. But everything was affected. And so from now on, he says, we know that day and night are also a result, really, in principle, they're a result of the six, every day is a result of one of the six midos, right? Sundays are chesed, and Mondays are gvura, and Tuesdays are tiferes, and so on. So if they're not shining through the midos, it's not coming through the heart, so how, he asks, how do we still have 7 days in the week? Maybe you should have canceled. He says, no, that's exactly the curse. Then one day will chase another. You won't see the difference between the days. You won't see that Sunday is chesed. You won't see that Monday is gvura. You won't see these things. What will you see? You'll see 24 hours. It has a day and a night. And you call it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And they almost mean nothing to you. וכשהאדם פונה פנים להשם, but when a person turns around again, he does tshuva, and he wants to face Hashem. דהיינו התשוקה והחשק הנפלא כשאינו אלא רק להידבק בהשם לבדו ואין זר איתו. When he's not distracted anymore. He's not showing, again, the sin is like distraction. That's really what it means. That I'm going to go off and do something else. By Chassidus, sinning is not necessarily doing something that's forbidden. It can be just being distracted. I'm not thinking about Hashem. The moment I'm not thinking about Hashem, what am I doing? I'm thinking about myself. Ashrei Adam lo yachshov lo Hashem avon. Right? So says the Baal Shem Tov, lo yachshov Hashem lo avon. Lo yachshov Hashem. If you're not thinking about Hashem, then it's a sin for you. That's the tenet of Chassidus. That's what Chassidus wants to say. So if you're able now to turn your face back to Hashem, ve'en zarito, and there's nothing distracting you, there's no false idols. The false idols are obviously today not some golden little statues that people bow down to. They're whatever else is distracting you.
Mobile phones.
Okay. Doesn't have to be. The mobile phone can be fine. It's the distraction of it that's the problem. If you're using it right now to give a shiur, you're doing this, you're doing that, there's no problem with it. The problem is when you reach for it, okay, 10 times a day, 10 times an hour.
10 times a minute.
When you look at, I don't know what they have on Android, on iOS, it tells you at the end of the week how many hours you spent on the phone every day, and on average. That's like, unfortunately, that's the Chassidus measurement. Or Chassidus, what do you call it? Mad Chassidut. Let me say a mad. Like
thermometer.
yeah, but in general.
Measuring device.
some kind of, it's a Hasidus meter. Okay? It checks how much of your time was spent not distracted. Because the phone is only distracting you most of the time, unless you're really doing something that's needed. But in general, it's usually a distraction. What are you being distracted from? So if you were working, fine, so you were working. If you were learning, it's even worse. If you were davening, Shem Rachem.
Yeah, but you can learn to daven from the phone.
That's fine then. Then you're not being distracted by the phone. You're using it for the right purpose. And he turns his back to the rest of the things in the world. So that is called being panim b'fanim with Hashem. Hashem is always facing you. The question is whether you're facing him or not. And again, it's whether your consciousness is there or not. גורם לחבר ה' בו' לדופקה להשם פנים בפנים, ובהתערותא דלתתא התערותא דלילה גם כן מבחינת פנים מאיר השם פניו. And so Hashem adds in his shining of light upon you. And then it says, והנערה יפת תואר וטובת מהר. It says about Esther, that she was a beautiful visage and beautiful looks. I don't know how to say it. She was beautiful. Grace or whatever. What is it talking about? That's what it means. When you say that Esther was beautiful, you're not talking about her physical beauty. That's not something that would show up in the Bible in the literal sense. It could be mentioned, but it's not because of that. If it was mentioned, it's mentioned because of something else. And what does it mean? Tov ro'i gorem gam ken kemare adam ata'anug v'atshukah milamala lamata. She was able to find favor in everybody's eyes. V'anara motzet chen b'nei kol ro'ea. It also says she found favor and grace in everybody's eyes. Chen literally means symmetry. That's what he's saying here. That if you're a certain way to Hashem, Hashem responds in like to you. V'inei nizkar be'etz chaim. Let's continue because we want to get to the end here. שעכשיו בזמן הגלות הנוקבה מקבלת מוחין שלא על ידי זה. So, what about nukva? How do people speak? How do people do things? That's the feminine. How do all the actions happen? It says in Eitz Chaim that during the time when there's no temple, when we're in Galus, which is incorrectly translated as exile, but it's when there's no temple, the feminine receives its chayus, it receives its mindfulness, it receives its life force directly from the source without za. It doesn't use the small countenance. It's not dependent anymore on feelings. It's sort of like a woman whose husband is drunk all the time. He can't give her anything. He has no feelings to share with her. Nothing. Or whatever his problem is. Doesn't matter. It's distracting him from being able to give her what she needs. So she's a dutiful woman. She has a household. She has children. She keeps taking care of them, even though her husband is missing in action. He's gone. We don't know where he is. We haven't seen him in a long time. And that's what it means that there is exile. That's what the Galus means. That the heart has been exiled. And who's it been exiled from? From the masculine. The masculine can't give feelings over it, meaning what he does and how he does is distracted. It's not with his whole heart and soul in it. So she receives directly from her, she goes back to her father's house. Who's her father? Chochma ila yesod abba b'chinat sovev kol almin. So she does things also by rote. She begins to do things just because she has the duty to do them. So he says that's the state of the world since the temple was destroyed. The world is a shell of its former self. There's no feelings. There's no midos. There's no higher emotions. So it functions. You see that there's day and night. You see that people are building things. You even see, like we said, the science and technology have advanced so much. But like I said in the first day that we learned this, technology has taken the place of feeling, of magic, whatever you want. Now people are, this whole thing where you mentioned you're not Harry, when I say you're Potter, right? So Harry Potter and everything it's opened a whole thing. I think that it started really with Star Wars, but anyway, it became like a deluge now of all these things with magic. What are people talking about? They miss it. They want to be in a world where there's feeling, where there's magic, where things don't just happen. You know, they used to call it romance. I don't know, something like that. That there's something more than just the technologies, something more than just stuff that always works. You want stuff to depend on your intent. Like I said, people turn the switch on the car, and they really think hard. You know, the car's going to work or not going to work depending. The car is not sensitive to your feelings, but that takes away from our humanity. Okay. Does it open us up in other areas? Maybe, but in the end, most of the actions that we do during the day, the guesswork has been taken out of it. The feeling has been taken out of it. It's not relevant anymore. And because of that, we live in a world that's soulless. And it says that's what the Beis HaMikdash gave. It gave you the soul. And that's called Sovev Kol Almin. Sovev Kol Almin is everything is equal. Everything is the same for everybody. It doesn't matter whether you have more feelings, less feelings, whether you mean it, you don't mean it. Sovev Kol Almin, the light that surrounds our world, is egalitarian. It's equal to everybody. The same. So whether I turn the microwave on, or you turn the microwave on, or a guy in Nigeria doesn't matter. The microwave is going to work as long as it has electricity. And that's a technocratic world where you're missing the main part, which is the heart and soul. So it's no longer Za, the Nehi specifically, Netzach Hod Yesod, victory, acknowledgement and foundation of the small countenance that become her energy, her moichin. אלא מוחין דזה שהיה לוקח מנהי דאבא ואמא, תשו בבחינת דורמיתא, לוקח תנוק ואותם המוחין. But rather, she has replaced him. So she takes her energy from where he took his energy. Except that by him, that small countenance, the energy passed through the heart. There was a feeling that it was heartfelt. That the energy became intentional. It became something with meaning. והעניין, למשל, כמו שאדם יכול לדבר דברי חוכמה ודעת שבמוחו בלי אמצעות המידות שבלב. You can be cold and calculated and speak a lot of wisdom. In the same way, בחינת ממלא כל המין, מתלבש בתוך כל המין, להחיותם לקמם, בא לו חיות זה, המשכת החיות מחיי החיים, מקור חיים עליונים, הנקרא חוכמה עילה, סובב כל המין. In the same way, everything that's happening in the world, its energy, its life force is coming directly from the mind of the world, as it were, but no longer from the heart of the world. בלתי התלבשות תחילה במידות הנקראים זה, להשתשב בצמצומים רבים דרך נקבים וחלונות. וזהו שאמרו ישראל בגלות כי אברהם לא ידענו. And that is what the verse that we started with, and upon which this mimer, this essay is called. Abraham didn't know us. Okay? That's what it means. כי אתה השם אבינו, כי כל ניצוץ נפש וכל אחד ואחד מישראל, או לוקח אביו בעזרו, אף שקודם שפניו בבחינת פנים הנ"ל. כשהמין המונה אמיתית, כי אתה אבינו בבחינת סובב כל המין. So what are we left with? We're left with saying Avraham, meaning Chesed, is not part of what knows us, meaning we don't get our life force through Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, and so on. Rather, we get it directly from you, Hashem. And who is you, Hashem, here? It's what Avram called Hashem. Avram called Chochmah, right? Avram's Chesed. And when he says when we say Elokei Avraham in the Amida, right? What do we mean? We mean Chochmah, because it's the one above Chesed on the right side. Okay, so Avraham, he doesn't know us anymore. We don't receive from Chesed. We don't receive from emotional midos, from the emotional faculties. How do we receive? We receive directly from the mind. So everything becomes very intellectual. But as much as it's intellectual, it's missing Hergish. Okay, it's missing the heart. And anyway, Ata Avinu, he says that's what it means. That what time do you need to leave?
8:30.
Oh, okay. That's what it means that we say to Hashem, "You are our Father," and we're talking about Sovev Kol Amin, about the light that surrounds all worlds, and is not heartfelt. It's just egalitarian. It's equal to everybody. The Kula Kamei Kolo Chashiva. But you have a problem here that you don't count.
Why did Hashem destroy the Beis HaMikdash?
Who destroyed the Beis HaMikdash? We did.
Why did you allow it?
We didn't want it. We didn't want it. Why did we not want it? Good question. And these are all examples of Sovev that on any 10 Jews, doesn't matter who, any 10 Jews, the Shechina dwells. The Shechina here is the Nukva. It's what we were talking about. All you need is 10. The moment you have 10, doesn't matter who they are, doesn't matter how much Torah they know, whether they know anything at all. The moment you have 10 and they're sitting together and they're doing something in holiness, the Shechina is there, the divine presence is there. Why? Because it doesn't matter anymore whether you have emotions or don't have emotions. It's just technical. Uvchinat. So again, I'm downplaying it, or I'm painting it in a negative way. There's also a positive side to it. The positive side is that thanks to the fact that there is Soviv, that there's this egalitarian light that treats everybody equally, there's also a possibility of connecting to Hashem without doing tshuva, without the Beis HaMikdash, without churning to Hashem. Okay? You can still receive all the energy that you need in order to function. ובבחינת סובב כל עלמין, you hear? אין עוונות מבדילים ומפסיקים בין ישראל חולו להשם חטאת, נושא עוון, זדונות נעשו כזכויות. And when you're talking about the light that surrounds all worlds, the avon, the iniquities, don't mean anything. Because there he ignores them. So you're in a strange world. We're in a strange world since the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Certainly at a general level, when looking at the general population, we're in a state in which it's hard to do tshuva. It almost doesn't mean anything. Why doesn't it mean anything? Because tshuva is only about us. We don't know whether Hashem has forgiven or not. Rather, what do we say? We say, Baruch atah Hashem, chanun v'yislach. We say, in any case, Hashem forgives. It's technical.
But Dafka in the last 30 years has been more bali tshuvas than any other time.
You're talking about lifestyle. I'm talking about tshuva in the sense of heartfelt tshuva. People change their lifestyle. You see them sitting for hours weeping about all the averos they did. Never seen anything like that. I've never done that. Maybe I've done it once, but that's when I really felt it. And it was more like the Soviv was ignoring me. I was already not receiving life force. Then you do tshuva. But the sense of being clean, in the sense of emotionally clean, and removing all the iniquities from myself, that's almost unheard of. So people, again, it's a technical world. It's like the moment that you say Amida, you can say Chanuna V'Lislach. It's a given. It's harder to live in a world where everything is through the emotions. You have to check yourself 100 times. Okay, that's how David lived. David lived in that type of world. So Tehillim is all about these expressions of how I'm not clean on the inside. I keep saying that. I need to cleanse myself. And how could somebody, in today's world, it's almost impossible to imagine that somebody would cry every night over one thing that he did. How can it be that way? Like nobody has those types of emotions. They don't have nobody has anything near that. Probably cry for one night, 2 nights, a week, but 22 years. Who ever heard of anything like that? Doesn't exist. But that was the world when the Beis HaMikdash was around, where the Aron was around, the tabernacle, the same thing as the Beis HaMikdash, in this respect. Okay. Ki b'bchinat sovev kol hamin en ha'olam mafsik klal. There's a very serious mimer here, very serious essay, very, very basic. That when you talk about sovev, the light that surrounds our world and is egalitarian, the world never stops. There's nothing to stop it. It's always on. It's not dependent on your actions. It's not dependent on your feelings. It's not dependent on anything. It's just like the sun. It always shines. K'ma'amar Razal, hen gvurotav ovdei kochavim merakdim b'yecholo. What is, they said this about a pasuk. The pasuk in Varim says, Ha'akel ha'gadol ha'gibor v'hanora. right? And Yirmiyahu said, how can you say that Hashem is the great and the mighty and the terrible God? How can you say He's mighty? Look, there are idol worshippers dancing inside His temple. So how can you say He's mighty? So He took it away. He took away the Gibor. He says, El Agadol V'Anora. That's how Yirmiyahu describes Hashem. He takes out the middle adjective. He's no longer mighty, because we don't see His might. So said the Anshe Knesset Agdola, the sages of the Second Temple period, when they came back to Eretz Yisrael, they said, no, that exactly is His might. That He's willing to sustain even idol worshippers dancing in His temple. That's His might. That's how mighty He is. And it's like what we call today, He can contain even this. He can suffer even this. Why was it in the past that... Again, this is what, the simple way to say everything we're saying now is something that I've heard, which is like making fun a little, but there's some truth to it. That in the past, God was a creator. Today, He doesn't even host a talk show. Where is He? What are you talking about? Show me that what I do matters. And it's not so much that people are... Again, we're talking about miracles. So people want to see miracles. But the first and foremost miracle, way before you start talking about miracles in the sense of, a tree growing in a day, the biggest miracle is in your heart. Show me that davening will change the way I feel. It almost never happens, if it ever happens. Show me that Hashem cares. That's what I mean by a miracle, really. That there's what should I call it? That the relationship is personal. It's personable and it's personal. Show me that. I mean, He used to be the creator. He used to care about everything. He created the whole world. Everything. You read the Tanakh, you read the Bible, and He's interested in everything. And He has something to say about everything. And even simple people had prophecy. So where is that? Where did that go? So prophecy ended. Prophecy, which is like the personal relationship, ended with the destruction of the first temple. And he asked about the second temple. So the second temple, there was what we call the Ruach HaKodesh, the divine spirit. So things that weren't prophecy mamish, but they were close to it. After the second temple was destroyed, even that's gone. So it's true that once in a while, and that's what Chassidus was about, you find the person who churns to God, who really churns to Him, and then the whole idea of Chassidus is that here's an individual, a Rebbe, whose relationship has become personable again. Why? Because he's opened his heart to Hashem. He's not distracted. He spends all his time developing this relationship. And so once in a while you find a person who's able to get over the Sovev, who's able to get beyond the technical side of Yiddishkeit. That's the real miracle. And then you understand why he has miracles. Why he can do miracles. Because he's working with his heart. That was the entire point of Chassidus. This is a basic essay. The more I think about it, the more I see how many of the ideas of Chassidus he's bringing. Okay? And so Hashem, from the point of view of the Sovev, of the light that surrounds all worlds, which is egalitarian, even idol worship is like a fly on the other side of the house, on a window. What do I care? I don't care. It doesn't mean anything. I'm so distant from it. Once explained that to make everything equally distant from you, it's like you're an Andromeda, and then with the distance from Andromeda to the sun, and the distance from the Andromeda to the Earth, it's the same thing. Who cares? It's no difference. Yeah. It's batel billion. Like there's no. And even that is only the way we can explain it using a parable for us. אבל באמת אין ארוך כלל היעדר תפיסת מקום שבחינת עולמות עליונים ותחתונים לגבי בחינת הווה סובב כל המין חוכמה אילה. Bless you. But relatively speaking, it is incommensurate to even explain, to use a mashal like from Andromeda to us, or to the sun, or to the moon, as being an example for how the differences are canceled out because of the great distance. That's incommensurate how it really is between Chochmah Ilah, between the supernal wisdom of the world of emanation and the lower worlds, and our reality. And let's finish. ולעתיד לבוא כתיב שינקום ילבש בגדי נקם תלבושת, פירוש שיצמצם את עצמו בכמה צמצומים עד שיתלבש במידות עליונות, ומשם יוכל להשתשב בצמצומים רבים שיוכל להיות בחינת נקמה מעובדי כוכבים הרקדים ביכולו. There's a lot of nevuahs that talk about God suddenly coming with certain garments. And they're all talking about the end of time. When Hashem does return, again, what does it mean? Hashem returns. He was here the whole time. The garments means that he will contract his light again into the memale. It won't just be the sovev, it'll be the memale. It'll be the direct human experience, the heart. It will be how we function on a daily basis. And when that happens, when it's like that, then the idolaters cannot survive. That'll be a day of revenge against them. Because idolatry is really, as it comes out from here, idolatry today is technology. I'm not saying that technology is bad. I'm saying that when you use something, when you create a relationship with something where you have no heartfelt relationship with it, and you treat it like it's just a tech, it's just some kind of thing that no matter what you do, it's got to work. And it's like taking a person for granted. It's like children treating their parents. It takes them a long time until they realize that their parents have feelings, and they're human beings, and this and that. And maybe they never realize this. Maybe they can never realize it. But when you see that your children can't, you begin to think about, how am I treating my parents? And when you do, then the light bulb turns on. And then idolatry falls. And then being technocratic falls away. And then you begin to feel the heart. And then that's the end of idolatry. Because again, idolatry in the ancient times wasn't exactly like that. It was a little like that, but not exactly like that. There was more feeling in it. But it was always different from Torah, and it was always different from it was always different from the way the Jews worshipped. Because the worship in Judaism was always meant to be heartfelt. It was always meant to be that you don't control, you don't hold the key to Hashem's actions. You don't have that in your hands. What do you have in your hands? The only thing you have in your hands is your feelings, your emotions, how you act. That's the only way to relate to Hashem. You're not going to get away with just doing a ritual. They're not rituals. What was done in the temple was not ritualistic. It was the priesthood in the temple was not the priesthood in the Baal's temple. Completely different. And that's what Eliyahu laughs at them. He says, why don't you yell to him more? He's old, he doesn't hear. Our God is older. And you know what? That's exactly what we do. When we see that Hashem is not listening to us, we yell harder. When he laughed at them, it wasn't, that's exactly what you need. What do you say to somebody who says, I davened for 3 days and nothing happened? He says, you have to daven harder. What do you mean by harder? It has to be more emotional. It has to come from the depths of your heart. You have to cry. If you really mean it, you're going to be crying. You couldn't say that to the Baal. If you said that to the Baal worshippers, they'd laugh at you. What are you talking about? You're going to yell at your computer to work? It's not going to work any better. It's nonsense. So on that level, there was something very similar in idol worshiping. Is Hashem against it? He's not against it if there's also the intent, if there's also the side of the memale. To say it another way, in the temple service, there was something that was brought every single day the same way. The tamid. There was one. There are things that you have to have tamidin kesidran, that you have to have an order. That's the sovev. But it only works. It only works if it's part of a whole system. And the whole system is, if you have a tamid, I don't know, it's interesting to ask, what would happen if the tamid was shechted and nobody had a personal korban to bring that day? What does that do? I've never seen this question asked. But if nobody came from themselves to offer something that they needed, what would that do to the tamid? Because I understand that the tamid is needed, but it only works in conjunction with the fact that there is that there is a personal relationship. Or to say it another way, how was it done? I think that the way it was done is that the tamid was the ritual part, but the part that wasn't ritualistic was the singing or the Vim or the Yisrael. Anyway, so let's end here and hopefully finish tomorrow.
Yeah, be it is what the Shem. What was the name?
What?
What was the name?
Course
Meditation.
Course yeah.
You'll be out.